Welcome to this special two-part series on Rain on Leadership. We're going to be talking about children's ministry, children's discipleship, the pandemic. We got a lot to talk about, but we are blessed to have the president and CEO of AWANA, Matt Markins, with us. Matt, welcome to Rain on Leadership. I'm going to say a few words about AWANA, but I want to just tell you before we get any further in this, welcome. I know that you are north of us. I'm in South Nashville. You're in North Nashville. You're in Gallatin, and I'm in Franklin. So I'm going to throw a stone and see if I can hit your home from here.
I'm ready. Good to be with you guys.
Hey, we want to talk just a moment about AWANA. You know that name. The name AWANA is synonymous with children's discipleship, with children's ministry. There's so much that we could say about it, but I want you to put this date down and just make every effort to attend in person or online. It is the second annual AWANA Child Discipleship Forum. It's in the Nashville area, September 22nd to 23rd. You're going to be able to take research from AWANA and AWANA and apply that to your children's ministry. You're going to get information to help you with your children's ministry. So whether you are online or in Nashville, you are going to get a lot of information in your ministry, and life and church will be blessed. Once again, childdiscipleshipforum.com is where you register. You can see it in the show notes as well. I welcome Matt Markinson, but I want you to introduce him a little more formally than me just saying, hey, you're in Gallatin, ain't you?
Yeah, Matt Markins is the president and CEO of AWANA, a global leader in child discipleship. Matt's got 3 books that he has co-authored, most notably Resilient Child Discipleship and The Fearless Future of the Church. He's also the co-founder of the Child Discipleship Forum, which we are telling you about. So make sure you go to childdiscipleshipforum.com. And Matt's got a wife, Katie, and they've been involved in children's ministry for more than 25 years. They love their family. They've got 2 sons, and they enjoy slow breakfasts, as we talked about on the previous episode. So we don't have to rehash that conversation. But it doesn't have anything to do with eating your food slow because it'll get cold. It has to do with spending time.
I love how you guys are very concerned about the cold food. This is awesome.
I haven't said a word about it. It's my son. He sounds like he's just, what's wrong? What's wrong, son?
I eat standing up. Like I take 10 minutes to eat and I'm done. And then I don't do slow breakfast. I just found that it's in his bio, and I found it very intriguing. There's always one thing in a bio where you're like, what is that about? Anyway.
I hope that our listeners and our viewers will remember something about Matt other than slow breakfast.
He's going to take that out. He's going to
anything else.
He's going to go to his marketing people and he's like, yeah, take that part out for future stuff. Well, we're glad to have you, Matt, and thanks for joining us on the show. Thanks for AWANA for sponsoring this special 2-part episode of Rain on Leadership. All right, so what are you likely missing with family discipleship in the church? So I'm going to just come right out of the gate and ask it in the form of a question. Matt, what are churches missing with family discipleship?
Well, we wanted to know the same thing, which is why we worked with David Kinman and the Barna Group this last year to field the largest children's ministry research project ever conducted by the Barna Group. And our biggest insight in the space of what you would call, quote unquote, family ministry, which obviously includes children's ministry as well. The biggest insight we gathered there is that we are at a stalemate between the church and the home when it comes to who's primarily responsible for discipling our children. So we kind of sense this going in, but the data makes it abundantly clear. Okay, so for those of you who have been doing children's ministry or family ministry for a while, you guys remember back in 2003 when Barna published the book Transforming Children to Spiritual Champions, and he said this rough quote, essentially, parents are the primary disciplers of their children. Well, everyone in children's ministry took out their sword, cheered, and said, charge the hill. Finally, someone gets us with data, right? But what didn't happen over the last 19 years, what hasn't necessarily happened is a mass moving of the needle of parents actually taking up the mantle and discipling their kids. Just look at Kara Powell's data from about a decade ago. 12.5% of parents actually have discipleship or spiritual conversations with their students. So it's still a small percentage of parents, Christian parents, engaging with their kids spiritually. So we call it the stalemate. Here's what we mean by that. According to the Barna data from this study right here, Children's Ministry in a New Reality, 95% of church leaders and children's ministry leaders say that parents are the primary disciples of their kids. That's not a no, that's a heck, or that's not a, yeah, that's not a no, that's a heck no, right? Like that says parents are responsible. Now, when it comes to church congregants and parents, it's pretty much split right down the middle. About around half say, well, I think I'm responsible as a parent. And around half, it's the parents saying, I think the church is responsible. And so when we dig under this and we look at a lot of the cross-tabulation data, what we're seeing is that there's just not really a sense of, I'm really responsible for discipling my children. And so as children's ministry leaders, what we think the takeaway is the way we use our weekend model, we can use it more creatively. And we've got to figure out how to do better equipping with parents. Unless we change the model slightly, and unless we do more equipping, we're going to continue to have that confusion between the church and the home as to who's actually responsible to disciple our children.
We are talking with Matt Markins, the president and CEO of AWANA. On the topic is, what are you likely missing with family discipleship in the church? And I heard that stalemate. And I started saying, now, what is he going to say? And now I realize it makes a lot of sense. And also, don't forget the Child Discipleship Forum on September 22nd and 23rd in the Nashville area. You can see in the show notes how to register for that, both either in person or online. Matt, where do single parents fit into this equation with the AWANA, with children's ministry, with the discipleship of children? What do we need to know? It's a big question, but what do we need to know there?
Well, whether you're single or married, divorced, whatever the variables are, one of the really pieces of good news is in one word, and it's talk. Parents who talk to their kids have the infrastructure or the system or the culture that you would need to disciple your children. So, you guys know the business term KPI, key performance indicator. We use those terms in our workplaces a lot. Talking is essentially a KPI. Like, if parents have regular dialogue and conversation with their children, maybe about the Chicago Cubs, the Atlanta Braves, the Tennessee Titans, or violin or ballet or whatever, like if parents can talk to their children, you actually have a connection, a personality, a system, and a culture to be able to do discipleship. And so we like to tell parents, if you whether you're a single mom or you're a two parent home, when you bring that baby home from the hospital, talk to your baby day one. And I remember with my wife, I was like, what are you doing? Why are you talking to Warren? He can't understand you. She said, he can't understand me today, but as the days turn into weeks, the weeks turn into months, turn into years, it's going to be so natural for him to talk to us because we talked with him since day one. And so if you will just talk to your kids, and by the way, that gives a great opportunity to say, oh boy, I fussed at you a little too harshly. I need to apologize to you. We can model through conversation how we hurt our kids and how we need to ask forgiveness. If we don't give kids through dialogue a system for living out life and discipleship, we're not really giving them what they need. And so I think the optimistic news is through conversation, talking, and dialogue, we can disciple our kids by taking small steps of faith in there.
Boy, you're bringing up some great memories for me, Matt. February 23rd, 1980.
I don't remember.
You shouldn't remember. You were born on that day. Your mother endured 31 hours of hard labor. And it was.
Thanks, Mom.
Yep, it was really hard. And again, how you came into the world was kind of rough, but not necessarily the topic of this podcast. But
apparently, I was an ugly baby.
You were beaten up pretty badly. You really were. That's another topic because all one side of your face was just mashed in. But I'm getting off topic.
Didn't my mom's mom look at you and say, He looks like your side of the family.
Yeah, he has cat ears. That's exactly right. She did. And
That turned out all right.
you turned out all right. So Nellie Jo, of course, held him first when he came to the world. And they gave him to me before he was even cleaned up. First thing I did was I prayed for him, to him. First thing I did. Second thing I did is I sang a Beatles song to him. So those were the first two things that you heard from your dad outside.
I still don't know all those Beatles songs you sang to me.
I'm curious, what song was it?
I will.
Ah.
Who knows how long I love you? Who knows I always will? Will I wait a lonely lifetime? If you want me to, I will. I could keep on, Matt, but you don't want me to do that.
Well, it's great. It's great advice for whatever your home looks like. I mean, families today we know look very differently. It's they're traditional families, a mom and a dad is wonderful, and we love that ideal. But then not every home is the ideal. And I see a lot of single parents in my church, and ministries often do not account for them. But just that advice that really any parent can do, whether you're a single parent or whether you're in a traditional home or not, is talk to your kids. And you can start that process now. I mean, it's just one of those things. It's like, I'm not really doing that. Well, start now.
Best time to start is today. Yeah.
So this is probably something that I would imagine you would agree with, but we're talking about things that you are likely missing with family discipleship in the church. When I look at budgets, when I look at church budgets, children's ministries and student ministries are often the most under-resourced churches, under-resourced ministries in the church.
Yeah.
What can we do about this? Because we say we want to invest in the next generation. We say that we want kids in our church. We say we want, a multi-generational church. And then the children's minister is the lowest paid person on staff, and the children's ministry budget pales in comparison to other parts of the budget. What do we do about this?
Have you guys heard the term burning platform? A burning platform?
But it sounds exciting.
Yeah. So this is about, I think back in the 90s, there were some oil workers out off of the North Sea on one of these oil rigs. They're on these stilts up off of the water. There was an explosion. It caught on fire. 163 men died, but two or three men stood at the edge of the platform and had to come to the reality that I either stay here and I die on a burning platform, or I jump into the North Sea, which is frigid waters, and I'm jumping 90 feet down. And so these two men decided to jump, and they survived. So it's an important metaphor, because we need to look at all the assumptions we make about the past and the models we're using today and ask ourselves, is this a burning platform? Here's what I mean by that. Our children today are living in a highly secularized, post-Christian culture where there's hardly any escaping it, because screens are everywhere. And you might be a parent who's doing everything you can to remove all of those items from your child's lives, but it's inevitable because they're just so pervasive. They're at a friend's house. You can't pump gas without having a screen preaching at you, right? Like, screens are everywhere. So secularism and post-Christian culture is pushing in from all sides, including our education systems, entertainment, whatnot. And so if that system that's shaping our children is so pervasive, we have to ask ourselves, the system we have at church, what we've set up for at church, is it going to be able to form our children as it's currently set up based on all the past assumptions? Is it positioned for today and for the future? I would argue that if we don't move toward a model that leads to lasting faith, most known to lead to lasting faith, then we're standing on a burning platform, and it's not a matter of will we jump to a new model, it's a matter of when will we. And so what we would say is churches have got to move to the three primary variables that lead to lasting faith with children. We call those belong, believe, become. That's our language, but you could call them relationships, scripture engagement, and experiences. So I would talk to my pastor about this idea of a burning platform. I would, describe the culture our kids are growing up to, describe cultural Christianity, describe post-Christian culture, describe secularism, and ask, how is all this really forming the screens? How are they all forming our children? And then look at our children's ministry model as we have it set up. Is it going to form children with lasting faith? And I would argue that we should go to our whiteboards and put those three words, belong, believe, become, or relationship, scripture, engagement, and experiences, and ask, is every part of our children's ministry designed to do those three things? Are those the three primary objectives that lead to lasting faith in kids? And I would redesign my whole children's ministry around those types of objectives.
Matt, a church becomes what it celebrates. How can churches celebrate children's ministry? How can they celebrate it where it is very clear that the people that are children and the ministries that encompass the children are a priority and are important to our church?
Well, again, if I was a pastor or a leader, church leader, or a leading parent in my church community, I would look backwards once again. And I would say, what are the key milestones in my life that made me who I am, that I celebrated, that were big, epic moments, or maybe some that should have been, but they were handled very poorly, right? So a lot of those happen in childhood. A lot of those happen prior to age 18, prior to age 21. And so if those times are so formative, which I believe there's no arguing that they're not, if those are so formative, let's build our church culture around how to celebrate those. Children, the birthing of children, baby dedications, salvations, baptism, rite of passage, pre-adolescence, all of these things are rally cry points for the church community to celebrate them. And one more thing I would attach to this, again, I've already mentioned this, but if I were a lead pastor, that stat from Barna Group that says 94% of human beings, their worldview is largely set by age 13. If I was a lead pastor, I would put that as a post-it note on my desk, and I would think about that for the next 18 months really hard. And I would ask myself, what are we doing to form kids with lasting faith prior to age 13? I would make that a chief objective. And I think your point about celebrating kids, that's a culture of child advocacy in our church that says kids matter. Faith formation prior to that age is a big deadline we got to hit.
People often forget that children don't have a voice in the church typically. You're not bringing children into the budget meeting, although it may be a good idea if you're a children's minister to parade them in. And my point is, a lot of ministries will have a natural voice built into the budget, like the worship ministry, facilities, things. And those are important things. I certainly don't think that they need to suffer at the expense of the children's ministry. But the children are not at the table. And we sometimes forget that it's just easier to downplay what happens in the children's ministry. And it's easy to miss the children's ministry entirely because these children don't have a voice. You hear them, you see them, but they're not there to express what's important to them. And so it takes advocates on their behalf in the church to make sure that they are, a focal point of
and I think you're alluding to a really good point. And by the way, we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but I did write this book called Leading Kidmen with Pat Simo. She was a children's ministry leader at Willow Creek for about 30 years. Anyway, Pat and I wrote this together, highlighting the very point you're making, meaning children's ministry leaders are closest to the pain points of the church than almost any other staff member, but they're the least leveraged. They don't have the position. So this whole book is designed to coach a children's ministry leader on how to lead cross-functionally and how to lead up to your pastor. But we have a whole chapter on how to establish your leadership voice. And Sam, that's the reason I said part of what I said earlier is I think we have to become storytellers, because when you can tell a story to your lead pastor that evokes empathy, emotion, compassion, as well as really good logic and rationale, you can really help open your pastor's eyes and heart and mind to understand, okay, my kid's leader is trying to tell me something that matters here. And so I think storytelling and establishing your voice as a children's ministry leader, even if you have a very small budget or you don't have the resource or you don't have the support you need, I think we've got to cultivate that to be those advocates for children. I think it's possible. We can figure out how to do it.
We have been talking with Matt Markins, the president and CEO of AWANA, and we are so thankful to AWANA for their sponsorship of this special series. We're particularly thankful to Matt, who's given us all kind of nuggets in here, and we've been talking in episode 2. By the way, if you didn't get to listen to episode 1, go back and listen to it. They're yours to keep as long as you want them. But we've been talking about what you are likely missing with family discipleship in the church. Before we sign off on this second part, Matt, I will say thank you, but I'll also ask you, any closing words that you would like our YouTube audience to see and hear, and then our podcast app audience to hear?
Yeah, I think if I was a lead pastor, I would think about, what is and what is not happening in the homes of our families in our church, especially the ones that have children. And there's bountiful research to help us understand that discipleship activities are not happening in the home like we would like them to be happening. And so if I was a lead pastor, I would ask myself, hey, do we have a fellowship hall? Do we have a multi-purpose room? Do we have some type of room where while I'm preaching, we can get a group of parents to be trained and equipped on how to actually disciple their kids? What's missing is equipping. We have pastors may preach a one sermon a year on, hey, you need to be discipling your kids, or they may point out to a book or a resource. What's missing is training, because when you do training, it's multi-sensory, it's modeling, it's role playing. You can get parents involved. If I was a lead pastor, I'd be developing a 4-week series on how to actually get every parent in our church into the fellowship hall for some little, so think about it. If you could train 25 or 10 or 50 or 100 people a week, get them through a 4-week series using your multi-purpose rooms on how to actually disciple your parent or train your parents to disciple your children. But imagine the long-term impact of that. That's saying, hey, my teaching and preaching is great, but we're going to equip these parents to actually know how to do it at home. Things like talking, praying, going on walks with my kids, all sorts of things that we can equip them to do. I think the impact of that would be far greater than a lot of the things we're currently doing within our current church model.
That is a great way. Sam, did you have something?
No, I was gonna say good word. Yes. And thank you, Matt and AWANA, for being a part of this 2-part series, 2 episodes here. So episode 1, and you can go listen to that. This is episode 2. We also want you to check out the Child Discipleship Forum that is occurring on September 22nd and 23rd. You need to reserve your spot today. It's very important to do that. There is a link in the show notes for you to click on if you are at your computer. If not, childdiscipleshipforum.com is a good place to go as well to be a part of this forum. And so again, thank you, AWANA. Thank you, Matt, for the sponsorship of this podcast. And we thank you, the listener, and all of you who are part of Church Answers, where we are growing healthy churches together.